I woke up from surgery, and the first thing I saw was the ceiling. The second thing I saw was a nurse I didn't know. The third thing I saw was the empty chair beside my bed, the chair where my parents had been sitting when they wheeled me in 6 hours earlier. I asked the nurse where they were. She checked something on her tablet. She had the expression of someone who had been asked this question before and had learned to answer it carefully. "They left a message at the nurse's station," she said. "They said they had to be somewhere and that they'd be back later tonight." I looked at the ceiling again. I had just come out of a surgery that had gone wrong in the middle, a complication they had not anticipated. The surgeon would tell me later, something that had required decisions and additional time, and the particular controlled emergency of a medical team responding to something they had not planned for. I had been on the table for 6 hours instead of 3. My blood pressure had dropped. There had been a period, the surgeon would say carefully, where things had been uncertain. And my parents had left. Later, I would find out where they had gone. My younger brother Rohan's regional under-19 cricket semifinal, 3 hours away by car. They had decided, at some point during my 6-hour surgery, that the game was something they could not miss. I lay in the hospital bed, looking at the ceiling. I thought about that for a long time. And then, with the particular clarity that comes when your body has been through something real, and your mind has been stripped of everything non-essential, I understood something I had been refusing to understand for 28 years. Part 1. The Architecture of Being Second. My name is Vikram Nair, and I want to tell you about the family I grew up in with precision, because the precision matters. I grew up in Pune, the eldest child of parents who were both professionals. My father was a civil engineer, my mother was a secondary school principal. They were not neglectful parents. They were present, organized, functional, the kind of parents who attended school events and signed permission slips and made sure the meals were on the table. By most external measures, they were good parents. My brother Rohan was 3 years younger than me. From the time he was 8 years old and showed the first signs of being genuinely exceptional at cricket, he had become the organizing principal of our family. Not through his own fault, he was a child, then a teenager, then a young man, and none of it was his doing. The family had reorganized itself around his talent the way families sometimes do, with the particular intensity of people who have been handed something that feels like destiny and are afraid to miss it. I was the background. Not invisible, I was there. I was fed and educated and nominally loved. But I was the non-cricket child, the one who read books and got good grades and wanted to study medicine, which was respectable but not exciting. Not the thing that made my father stand in the stadium with his chest out and his phone recording. Not the thing that brought relatives from 4 cities to watch. I had made my peace with most of this, or I had told myself I had made my peace with most of this. The ceiling of the hospital recovery room suggested otherwise. I had made my peace with being second at the dinner table, at the family WhatsApp group, at the gatherings where Rohan's latest match scores were discussed for 40 minutes, and my residency ranking was mentioned once. I had made my peace with the birthday that was always slightly smaller and the achievements that were always slightly less celebrated. I had not made my peace. I discovered lying in that hospital bed, with nearly dying while they were gone. The surgery had been for a cardiac issue, a condition I had been managing for 2 years, an abnormality in one of the valves that had been monitored and finally reached the point where the surgical option was the right one. It was not emergency surgery. It was planned, scheduled, discussed. My parents had been in the waiting room for the first 2 hours. The complication had started at hour 3. The surgeon had come out to update them, the standard protocol. My parents had been there for that update. They had known, at that point, that the surgery had become more complex and that the timeline had extended. And then, at some point in the following hour, they had left. They had told the nurse at the station where they were going. They had left their mobile numbers. They had said they would be back. They had driven 3 hours to watch Rohan play cricket. I found this out from the surgeon the following morning, when he came for his rounds, and I asked him directly to tell me everything that had happened, including what had been happening outside the operating room. He told me what he knew, carefully and professionally, which was that my family had left and that a friend of mine had arrived and had been in the waiting room for the last 3 hours of the surgery. "A friend," I said. "He said his name was Anand," the surgeon said. "He'd apparently been texting you and got no response and tracked down the hospital through your contact card." I lay very still. "Is he still here?" I said. "He was in the waiting room as of an hour ago," the surgeon said. "I imagine he's still there." I asked the nurse to have him sent in. Part 2. Anandi. Anand Krishnamurthy had been my closest friend for 6 years, from the first year of medical school, when we had been assigned to the same anatomy study group, and had discovered, over the course of one extremely difficult exam period, that we had the same method of processing pressure, which was to work through it with total focus, and then decompress by arguing about completely unrelated things until the pressure was gone. He was 30 years old, 2 years older than me, a general surgery resident at the same hospital where I had been admitted. Not on duty that night, not my surgeon or anyone on my case, just a person who had texted me the night before my surgery and gotten no response, and who had, apparently, shown up. He came into the recovery room and looked at me in the hospital bed, and his expression did something that I registered even through the post-surgical fog. "You're awake," he said. "Apparently," I said. My voice was rougher than normal. He pulled the chair to the bedside, sat down, not the empty chair, the chair on the other side. He had, I noted, made a specific choice about which chair to take. "How long have you been here?" I said. "Since about hour 4, he said. "You weren't on call," I said. "No," he said. "Why did you come?" I said. He looked at me with the direct expression he had when he was not going to perform anything. "Because you weren't answering your phone," he said, "and because I knew what yesterday was, and because I had a feeling." "What kind of feeling?" I said. "The kind that makes you drive to a hospital," he said. I looked at the ceiling. "My parents left," I said. "I know," he said, simply. Not with judgment. He knew my family, knew the shape of things, just I know. "Rohan's game," I said. "I know that too," he said. We were quiet for a moment. "The surgery had complications," I said. "I know," he said. "I talked to your surgeon." A pause. "I'm glad you're here." I turned my head to look at him. He was looking at me with that expression again, the one I had registered through the fog. It was the expression of someone who had sat in a waiting room for 3 hours not knowing, and who was now seeing the outcome, and who was feeling that outcome more than they were performing. "Anand," I said. "Yes," he said. "Thank you for coming," I said. "Don't," he said, gently. "Don't thank me for that." I understood what he meant. Some things are not in the category of things you thank someone for. They are in the category of things you simply register and carry and understand. I looked at the ceiling again. The empty chair was still there, on the other side of the bed. Part 3. The Recovery and the Reckoning. I was in the hospital for 5 days. My parents arrived the evening of the first day, drove back from wherever the game had ended, arrived at the hospital with the particular energy of people who know they have done something wrong, and have decided that the best response is to be very present and warm now, in the hope that the presence and warmth will cover the absence. My mother cried. She held my hand and cried and said she was so sorry. She hadn't known it would go so long. She hadn't known about the complication until they were already watching the game, I said. My voice was still rough from the breathing tube. Very flat, not angry, just accurate. She flinched. My father stood at the foot of the bed with the expression of a man who had made a decision and was now standing in its consequences. He said, "We thought you were stable," the nurse said. "The nurse said the surgery had gotten more complex," I said. "She said that at hour 3. "We thought stable meant," he started. "I know what you thought it meant," I said. Silence. "Rohan's team won," my father said. "I think he meant it as something. A reason, a context. I don't know what he thought it would do." I looked at him. "Good for Rohan," I said. That was all I said. I turned my head and looked at the window and let the conversation be over. Anand came every day. Not for long each time. He was a resident, and residents do not have long stretches of unallocated time. But every day, once, he came and sat in the chair he had chosen and talked to me, or sat quietly with me depending on what I needed, which he was remarkably accurate at reading. On the third day, he brought me a book, something he had picked from his apartment because he knew I had been working through a specific author, and this was the next one in the list. He set it on the bedside table without making a production of it. I had looked at it, and then at him, and had felt something that I was too recently post-surgical to examine directly. On the fourth day, we talked for 2 hours. About the surgery, and about what had happened, and about my family in the way we occasionally talked about my family. Honestly, without performance, both of us having enough information about each other's families to skip the preliminary explanations. "What are you going to do?" he said. "About what specifically?" I said. "About the fact that the shape of your relationship with your parents has just become very clear," he said. I looked at the window. "I'm going to finish recovering," I said, "and then I'm going to figure out what I want the shape of my life to look like." "Not the shape they've assumed," he said. "No," I said, "not that shape." He was quiet for a moment. "For what it's worth," he said, "I've watched you make yourself smaller for years, in the way you talk about your work around your family, in the way you calibrate what you share and what you don't. I think the surgery might have done something to that calibration." I looked at him. "What do you mean?" I said. "I mean that people who nearly die," he said carefully, "sometimes stop being willing to perform the smaller version of themselves." I sat with that. "Is that what you see when you look at me?" I said. "A smaller version?" He met my eyes. "I see both," he said. "I've always seen both, the performed smaller version and the real one. The real one is who shows up in the study sessions at midnight and in the wards when a case is difficult and in this room right now, talking about this." I looked at him for a longer moment, then was entirely comfortable. "Anand," I said. "Yes," he said. "Why did you really come that night?" I said. He was quiet for a moment. "I told you," he said. "You weren't answering and I had a feeling." "What kind of feeling?" I said again, more specifically this time. He looked at his hands. "The kind," he said slowly, "that you get when someone matters to you and something might be wrong." The recovery room was quiet. "I'll be discharged tomorrow," I said. "I know," he said. "I'll need someone to drive me home," I said. "I know that too," he said. "Will you?" I started. "Yes," he said, before I finished the question. Part 4. The phone call I made from the hospital. On the 5th day, before discharge, I made a phone call. Not to my parents. To my aunt, my father's sister, a woman named Priya who had always been the person in the family who said things directly, and who had, over the years, been the one adult I trusted with actual information about my actual life. She picked up on the second ring. "Vikram," she said. She had been told about the surgery. She had texted every day. She had not come because she was in Delhi and I had told her not to, that I was fine. "I need to tell you something," I said. "Tell me," she said. I told her, the full version, not just the surgery and the complication and my parents leaving. The full version, which was everything. The 28 years of being the background child. The ways I had made myself smaller. The things I had not said. The ceiling of the recovery room. And the chair on the other side of the bed that had been occupied by someone who was not my family. She listened to all of it, the way she always listened, completely, without filling the pauses. When I finished, she said, "I've been watching this for a long time." "I know," I said. "What are you going to do?" she said, same question as Anand. "I'm going to stop performing the smaller version," I said. She was quiet for a moment. "That's going to be uncomfortable," she said, "for some people." "Yes," I said. "Are you ready for that?" she said. "I nearly died," I said. "I think I'm ready." She made a sound that was not quite a laugh, but was related to one. Tell me about the person who was in the chair, she said. I paused. What makes you think there's a person? I said. You mentioned the chair twice, she said. In a conversation about your parents and the surgery, you mentioned the chair on the other side twice. I was quiet for a moment. His name is Anand, I said. Tell me about Anand, she said. Part 5, 6 years. I want to tell you about Anand and me properly, because what happened after the hospital has roots that go back 6 years, and you need the roots to understand the branches. We had met in the first year of medical school in the way I described. Anatomy study group, exam pressure, the shared method of working through things. From the beginning, there had been something about being with Anand that was different from other friendships. Not in a way I had been willing to examine directly, not for a long time. In the way that you notice a difference without nomming it, because nomming it would require a kind of honesty you are not yet ready for. He was the kind of person who thought about things all the way through before he spoke. Not slow, his thinking was fast, but the expression of it was deliberate. He had strong opinions about medicine and about what it was for. He had gone into surgery with the specific intention of the kind of surgeon who fixed things, and he brought to it the seriousness of a vocation rather than a career. He was not warm in the performing way. He was warm in the structural way, warm in the decisions he made, the way he organized his presence around the people he cared about, the way he showed up. He had shown up 6 times in 6 years in ways that I had filed carefully and not examined. When I had failed my first major exam and had not told anyone, he had somehow known and had appeared at my door with coffee and had sat with me through the worst of it without asking me to explain anything. When my father had said something dismissive about my research interest at a family gathering that Anand had attended, Anand had said, very calmly and precisely, that the research was significant and had named 3 clinical applications, and had moved on so smoothly that my father had not realized he had been corrected. When I had been sick during a particularly brutal exam period, he had taken notes for 2 days and delivered them without comment. When I had been in a relationship that was not right and had been unable to see it clearly, he had said nothing for months, and then, when I had finally seen it myself, had said only, I know, I've been waiting for you to see it. 6 times in 6 years, I had filed something and not examined it. The surgery had changed my calibration. Part 6, coming home and what came after. Anand drove me home on the morning of discharge. He had borrowed a car, his was in the shop, he said, which I suspected was not entirely true, but did not question. He drove with the careful attention of someone driving a post-surgical person, which was professionally informed and also felt like something more. My apartment was on the 4th floor. He helped me up the stairs, which I needed but did not want to admit needing, and he helped me admit it by making it practical and straightforward and without any fuss. He had been in my apartment many times. 6 years of friendship produced that level of familiarity. He knew where things were. He put the prescription bags from the hospital on the kitchen counter in order of timing, made me tea, and sat across the table while I drank it. I'm going to be here for the first week, he said, not asking, informing. You have work, I said. I've adjusted my schedule, he said. Anand. Vikram, he said, the specific tone he used when I was about to argue about something I should not argue about. I drank my tea. I have a spare room, I said. I know, he said. I've stayed in it before. This is different, I said. He looked at me across the table. Yes, he said, it is different. We looked at each other. The kitchen was quiet. The morning light was coming in through the window the way it did. Sideways, warm, the specific quality of autumn morning light in Pune. Okay, I said. Okay, he said. He made breakfast. I did not help because I was not capable of helping, and he did not pretend otherwise, which was exactly right. He made the kind of breakfast that someone makes when they know what you need, simple enough, correct. He had learned what I ate and what I didn't eat over 6 years, and this was the accumulated result. We ate. We talked about small things. The medication schedule, the follow-up appointments, the restrictions the surgeon had given me. And underneath the small things, the larger thing that neither of us had named yet, that was present in the room the way things are present when they are real. Part 7. The week. The week was, I want to describe it accurately. It was the most honest week I had had in recent memory. Not because of dramatic conversations or named things, but because of the specific quality of proximity without performance. We were two people in an apartment with no professional context, no social context, no reason to manage anything. Just the practical reality of recovery and the person who had decided to be there for it. Anand cooked every meal. Not dramatically. He was not performing caretaking. He was simply doing what needed to be done with the efficiency of a person who could assess a situation and meet its requirements. He was on his phone periodically for work, consultations, questions from junior residents, the constant background noise of a surgical career, and he handled these in the particular corner of the living room I came to think of as the work corner, kept separate from the rest of the apartment's texture. I read the book he had brought me in the hospital, and then 3 more. I slept more than I had slept in years, the deep sleep of a body repairing itself, and I woke to the sounds of him in the kitchen or moving through the apartment with the quiet consideration of someone who had thought about how to be in a space with a person who needed quiet. On the 3rd evening, we watched a film. This was normal for us. We had watched films together many times over 6 years, but the sofa proximity was different from before. The specific geometry of two people who are not pretending about something and who are therefore sitting at a distance that is honest rather than managed. On the 4th morning, I woke early and came to the kitchen and found him at the table with coffee, reading something on his phone. He looked up when I came in. That expression again, the one I had first registered through the post-surgical fog. I understood it better now. I understood what it was. "How did you sleep?" he said. "Better," I said. "Good," he said. He got up and made me coffee in the way he had learned over 6 years. The right strength, the right amount, no sugar. I sat at the table across from him. "Anand," I said. "Yes," he said. "I've been filing things," I said. He looked up from his phone. "For 6 years," I said. "Things I noticed and filed and didn't look at." He put his phone down. "I know," he said. "You know," I said. "I've been doing it too," he said. The apartment was quiet. The morning light was coming in. "Why?" I said. "Because you weren't ready," he said, simply, accurately. "And now," I said. He looked at me across the kitchen table. "I think the surgery might have done something to your readiness," he said, echoing what he had said in the hospital, but differently this time. "Yes," I said, "I think it did." We looked at each other in the morning light, and neither of us looked away, and the thing that had been filed for 6 years was no longer in the drawer. Part 8. MYPARENTS and the Reckoning. My parents came on the 5th day of the week. I had not called them. They had been texting daily, and I had responded with brief updates about my recovery because I was not ready for the other conversation, and the recovery was the priority. On the 5th day, they arrived at my door with food my mother had cooked and the particular energy of people who are trying. I let them in. I was not going to be cold. That was not my goal. But I was also not going to perform warmth I did not feel, which was the change the surgery had made. Anand was in the work corner on a call when they arrived. He acknowledged them and went back to his call. My parents registered his presence and did not comment. My mother set up the food. My father sat in the living room with the posture of a man who knows a conversation is coming. My mother knew too. I could see it in the way she was moving, purposeful, occupying herself with the food because the food was something concrete. When she sat down, I said, "I need to say something." "Yes," my father said. "What happened was not something I can pretend didn't happen," I said. "Not for the sake of family comfort. You left the hospital while I was in surgery that had become complicated. I nearly died. You were not there." My mother's eyes filled. My father's jaw was tight. "We didn't know it was going to," my father started. "You knew something had gone wrong," I said. "You had been told at hour 3. The nurse told you it was more complex. You chose to leave anyway. Silence. I'm not saying this to make you feel guilty forever, I said. I'm saying it because I've spent 28 years accepting a certain arrangement of priority in this family, and the surgery showed me what that arrangement looks like when it matters most. And I'm not going to accept that arrangement anymore. My mother was crying quietly. I love you both, I said, and I want a real relationship with you, not the managed version where I make myself smaller so there's more room for Rohan's cricket. The real version, with the full version of me. My father was very still. What does that mean? He said. It means that when I say something is important to me, it gets treated as important, I said. It means that my work and my life and my choices get the same space in this family that Rohan's career gets. It means that if I'm in surgery, you stay. A long silence. We know we were wrong, my mother said. Vikram, we know. I believe you know, I said. I'm telling you what changes. My father looked at the floor for a moment. Then he looked at me. Okay, he said, quietly, just that. Not a defense, not an explanation, just okay. It was the most honest thing my father had ever said to me. Part 9, the distance. Here is the part that was not clean. Because nothing is clean, and I want to be honest about that. In the weeks after the hospital, after Anand's week at my apartment, after the conversation with my parents, in the period when I was recovering and the acute things had been addressed, there was a distance between Anand and me. Not intentional, or not entirely. The week had been what it had been and neither of us had named it, and then it was over and we were back in our separate lives with our separate work, and the thing that had been present in the kitchen on the fourth morning was not named and therefore had no agreed-upon shape. Anand was busy. He was always busy. A surgical residency is not a life that produces much unallocated time. I was recovering, returning to work gradually, navigating the ongoing process of my changed relationship with my family. We texted. We met once for coffee. It was warm in the way our friendship had always been warm and also slightly different, slightly careful, in the way of two people who are both aware of something and are both uncertain about what the other person wants to do with it. I had the specific, accumulated feeling of someone who had made declarations about not being the smaller version of themselves, and was now, in this specific area, being the smaller version of themselves. I called my Aunt Priya. Tell me about Anand, she said, before I said anything. How did you know I was calling about Anand? I said. You only call me when something is unresolved, she said, and the family situation is resolved, at least for now, so it's the other thing. I told her about the fourth morning in the kitchen, about the filing and the 6 years and what had been said, and about the 3 weeks since and the careful distance and the way we were both being the smaller version. She listened. What do you want? She said. To stop filing, I said. Then stop filing, she said. Say the thing you've been filing. What if he doesn't? I started. He sat in a hospital waiting room for 3 hours not knowing, she said. He took a week of his residency schedule and stayed in your spare room. He has been filing the same things you have. I was quiet. Vikram, she said, you nearly died. You told your parents what you needed. You changed the shape of your relationship with your family. Is this one thing actually harder than those? I thought about it. Yes, I said. Why? She said. Because if I was wrong about my family, I had still lost something I already had, I said. If I'm wrong about this, I lose something I haven't had yet. She was quiet for a moment. That's the most honest thing you've said about it, she said. Now go say it to him. Part 10, what I said. I texted him on a Sunday morning. Not a long message, just, are you free today? I want to talk. He replied in 4 minutes, yes, come over. He lived 15 minutes from me. I drove over with the specific clarity of someone who has made a decision and is implementing it, the fear present but not in charge. He opened the door. He had been working, there were papers on his table, the particular organized density of a surgical resident's home workspace. He closed his laptop when I came in. Made tea. We sat across from each other at his table the way we had sat across from each other at mine for a week. The fourth morning in the kitchen, I said. He looked at me. You said I wasn't ready before, I said, and that the surgery had done something to my readiness. Yes, he said. I want to tell you what it did, I said, specifically. He was very still. It made me understand that the things I have been not saying are not safe in the drawer, I said. That there is no guaranteed time to say them later. That the ceiling of a recovery room is not the place I want to understand that I had things to say to someone, and I chose not to say them. He was looking at me with that expression, the one from the waiting room, the one from the kitchen, the one that I now understood completely. 6 years, I said, of noticing things and filing them, of being in the smaller version around every person in my life except you. Actually, you're the one place I was always the real version, and I didn't look at what that meant. Vikram, he said. Let me finish, I said. He waited. I'm not filing anymore, I said. What I feel when I'm with you, what you mean to me, what it meant that you were in that chair, I'm not filing any of it. I'm saying it directly. Because the surgery was a very clear message about what the alternative looks like. He was quiet for a long moment. The alternative, he said, is a ceiling you're looking at alone. Yes, I said. He stood up. He came around the table and he stood in front of me and he said, I've been the smaller version too, around you specifically, because you weren't ready and I didn't want to be the thing that made you uncomfortable in the one relationship where you were already the real version. I stood up. I'm ready, I said. I know, he said. I've been watching you get ready for 3 weeks. We were close in the way of two people who have been not close for 6 years and have removed whatever the distance was. Anand, I said. Yes, he said. Thank you for the chair, I said. Don't, he said, same as in the hospital, gently. I'm not thanking you for coming, I said. I'm thanking you for choosing the other chair, for not sitting in the empty one. He looked at me for a moment. Then something in his expression shifted, the last of the careful going out of it, the full version of him present in the room. I was never going to sit in that chair, he said. Part 11, R.O. Chan. I want to tell you about my brother, because the story is not complete without him, and because he deserves precision. Rohan was 25 years old. He was genuinely talented at cricket. This was not invented, not inflated. He was the kind of player that the sport produces once in a while, the kind that justified the attention. He had also grown up, as I had grown up, inside the family system that had organized itself around him, which meant that he had been given everything and had also, in a way, been given a burden, the burden of being the organizing principle, the thing everyone orbited. He had come to see me in the hospital, 3 days after the surgery, when his team had returned from wherever the regional game had taken them. He had come alone, not with our parents. He had sat in the chair that was not the empty one, and he had not been able to look at me directly for the first 5 minutes. I didn't know you were having complications, he said. They didn't tell me until after the game. I know, I said. I'm not angry with you, Rohan. He looked at me then. How are you not? He started. Because you didn't make the choice, I said. You were playing a game you didn't know. The choice was made by other people. He was quiet. I should have been here, he said, regardless. You didn't know, I said again. I knew you were having surgery, he said. I should have been here. I looked at him, this person who had been the son of our family's solar system for most of his life, who had not asked for that role, and who was now, sitting in a hospital chair, trying to figure out what his relationship with his brother was actually supposed to look like. Come visit more, I said. Not for the family gatherings, just come, have a meal, talk about something other than cricket, that's what I want. He absorbed this. Okay, he said. And when your season is done, I said, come for a weekend. I'll introduce you to someone. He almost smiled. Who? Someone who has been in a chair that you haven't been in yet, I said. He didn't fully understand what I meant. He would eventually. Part 12, What changed? 6 months after the surgery. I want to tell you what the 6 months looked like, because the change is in the detail. My parents are different. Not transformed, people are not transformed, but changed in the specific direction of effort. My father asks about my work now with the real question, the one that wants an actual answer, not the performative question that is waiting for the answer to finish so the conversation can return to cricket. My mother calls on my birthday with the full attention that the day deserves. Progress. Imperfect, ongoing, real. Rohan came for a weekend in month 2. He met Anand. They got along in the way of two people who are both direct and both genuinely curious about things, and the weekend was easy in a way that family weekends had not been for a long time. He came back in month 4. He is figuring out, gradually, what it means to be my brother in the real version rather than the performed family version. It is new for both of us, and we are learning it. My Aunt Priya came to visit in month 3. She met Anand. She looked at me over dinner in the specific way she has of communicating volumes without words, and then she said, to Anand, with the directness that is her entire personality, "He has been the smaller version around his family for years. Thank you for being the place where he wasn't." Anand had looked at her and then at me and had said, "Thank you for telling him to stop filing." She had smiled in the way of someone who has done something right. I am back at work. The cardiac issue, addressed, has made me more reliable than before, the uncertainty of the managed condition replaced by the clarity of the repaired one. I work with the particular focus of someone who has been reminded that the work matters and that the time to do it is now. The research interest that my father had dismissed, the one Anand had corrected him about, precisely and smoothly at a family gathering years ago, is the thing I am pursuing now. A paper in progress. A collaborator in another city. The small beginnings of something that will take years and that I am not afraid of taking years. The chair on the other side of the hospital bed is the image I come back to. Not the empty chair, the other one, the one that was chosen. I spent 28 years in a family that organized itself around something that was not me, and I made myself smaller to fit the available space, and I told myself I had made my peace with it, and then I nearly died, and the ceiling told me the truth. The truth was not about the family, it was about the chair. It was about the person who chose the chair that was not empty, who drove to the hospital on a feeling, who made coffee the right way and brought the next book and said, "Don't thank me for that," and sat across from me in 2 different kitchens in the morning light. It was about what it looks like when someone is just there, not performing presence, just there. I am not the smaller version anymore, not in any room, not for any reason. And the chair beside me is occupied by someone who chose it. Clapperboard final hook. I woke up from surgery, and the chair was empty. My parents had left for my brother's cricket game. I lay in that bed, and I looked at the ceiling, and I understood something that 28 years of being second had been slowly building toward. That being background does not mean you are less. It means you have been in a room where the wrong light was being pointed. And then the surgeon told me about a different chair, on the other side of the bed. Occupied by someone who had driven to the hospital on a feeling, and who had sat in it for 3 hours not knowing. That chair changed everything. Not the surgery, not the complications, not the empty chair my parents had left. The occupied one. The one that was chosen. I am back at work. The research is underway. My father asks real questions now. Rohan comes for weekends. The cardiac issue is repaired, and the repair has made me more present than the management ever did. And someone makes coffee the right way, every morning in a kitchen, where I am not the smaller version of anything. She was wrong, my family, not maliciously, but wrong, about what I needed and what I was worth and what space I deserved. The ceiling told me so. And the chair proved it. If this story found something you needed to hear, if you have ever been the background person in a room that should have seen you, like it, share it with someone who is still looking at a ceiling, and subscribe. Tell me in the comments, when did you understand that the space you had been given was not the space you deserved? And one last question. There is something that happened at month 4, Something involving Rohan and a conversation he had with Anand, alone, without me, that Anand told me about afterward. A conversation that changed something in my brother in a way I did not expect, and that added the last piece to what the surgery had started. Should I tell you what Rohan said? Part 2 is coming. Eyes. Subscribe. You will not want to miss it. The Revenge Chronicles.